Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Zachary bought his off-grid dream home deep in the Sierra Nevadas, he thought he'd found peace. Until a power-hungry HOA president arrived with fake maps, phony rules, and a plan to seize his land. What followed? A war of boundaries, fraud, and one epic stand for freedom. I bought the house because it felt like freedom. Not metaphorical, not poetic, literal freedom measured in acres, pine trees, and silence. 2.7 acres of high ground tucked into the Sierra Nevada foothills, with nothing but a dry riverbed and a stand of ancient pines between me and the nearest sign of civilization. When I signed the deed, the county registrar slid the final packet across the counter and said, "You realize this parcel has never been under any HOA in its history." I swear a choir sang behind me. I nodded and repeated the magic words. Yes, that's why I bought it. I'm a land surveyor by trade, the kind that gets called into courtrooms when property lines start wars between neighbors. I trust maps the way surgeons trust scalpels. I mapped this parcel myself before I even made an offer. I hiked the boundary with my RTK GPS gear, placed temporary markers, cross-checked everything with county archives and historical deeds that go back nearly half a century. Nothing touched this land. No easements, no restrictions, no nosy retirees with clipboards demanding that my trash cans match the color of the siding. For 2 months after moving in, life was bliss. I cleared dead brush, leveled a spot for a future gazebo, and brought in a diesel generator. Because when you live this far off the grid, relying on the electrical company feels like giving trust to a known arsonist. I split my days between fieldwork and building out my dream space. Pine-scented air, star-filled skies. My dog, Ranger, asleep under the workbench. I kept thinking, this is how land is meant to be lived on. The peace lasted until the morning I saw an unfamiliar Lexus SUV crawling up my gravel driveway. Too clean, too white, too aggressively suburban to belong here. Out stepped a woman in a matching pastel vest and helmet hair that looked engineered to withstand wind shear. She clutched a rolled map tube like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Good morning," she said with the self-importance of a parking meter with a badge. "I'm Karen Halloran, president of Pine Shadow Ridge Homeowners Association." I blinked. "Congratulations." She ignored that. "We updated our community boundary map. Your property is now within HOA jurisdiction. You'll need to sign these documents, pay a membership fee of $6,000, and submit a request for approval before constructing whatever that is." She motioned toward the generator pad like I had built a missile silo. I stared at her, slowly, deliberately. "I'm not in your HOA." Karen smiled as though speaking to a golden retriever trying its best. "You are now. Our updated map shifts the southern boundary line to include your parcel. It's all very official." I held out my hand. "Show me." She unrolled the map across the hood of her SUV. The paper was glossy, the lines thick and enthusiastic. The boundary looked like someone had drawn it using a crayon after 2 martinis. I traced the new border with my finger. "This isn't a county map. This," she said, tapping the corner proudly, "was approved by our community planning committee. That's not a real government entity. It's real to us," she snapped. I actually laughed. Not a chuckle. A full involuntary bark. "I am a licensed land surveyor. Your map is fan fiction." Karen's eyes narrowed into slits. "You will be fined if you refuse to comply." I stepped back and opened the gate. "Ma'am, you are trespassing. Leave." She hesitated as if unused to hearing the word no. Then she gathered her papers, huffed, and marched back to her SUV. "This isn't over," she said through the window. I smiled. "It definitely is." As the SUV rolled away, I caught the first bright glint of hostility in her eyes. Something predatory, something bored and dangerous. I went inside, pulled out my laptop, and ordered motion-detecting cameras, floodlights, and a gate buzzer. If Karen wanted a war over imaginary jurisdiction lines, I would document every second of it. And just like that, the quiet dream I bought turned into the opening move of a very stupid, very real battle. The letter arrived a week later, tucked neatly into a manila envelope with no return address. No postage either. Someone had driven it out and dropped it in my locked mailbox by hand. Ranger had barked earlier that morning, but I didn't think much of it. Probably a deer or another overfed neighbor's cat thinking it could handle the forest. I opened the envelope at my kitchen counter with my coffee half sipped and my patience at full capacity. Inside was a thick bundle of papers. A notice of inclusion, a copy of Pine Shadow Ridge HOA's updated jurisdictional map, and a fee schedule that looked like something out of a failed Ponzi scheme. HOA annual dues, $6,000. Permit processing, $850 per incident. Aesthetic integrity assessments, don't even ask. The map again. Same cartoon boundary line, only this time printed in color and emblazoned with a blue and gold circular seal that read Community Planning Committee of Pine Shadow Ridge. Around the border, faux laurel leaves and a quote in Latin, Ordine per Communitatem. I doubted Karen could even translate it. I squinted at the seal. It wasn't county issued. It wasn't municipal. Hell, it wasn't even a real nonprofit. It was just a damn sticker. I called the county registrar. Patty, who recognized my voice before I said my last name, confirmed within minutes. No changes had been filed regarding HOA boundaries in this part of the county. No new plats, no petitions, nothing even pending. Zachary, she said, with the dry tone of a bureaucrat who's seen some things. If that HOA claims otherwise, they're committing fraud. Want me to file a formal complaint? Already writing mine, I said. I spent the next 2 hours drafting a response. I attached copies of my deed, the county certified plat, and an annotated overlay of the HOA's original boundary with their little doodle map superimposed, helpfully labeled in bold, not legally valid. I CC'd the California Bureau of Real Estate and the local Office of Consumer Affairs. Then I emailed the whole bundle to every address listed on their website and printed a hard copy for courier delivery. But the real punch came from my consulting firm's legal team, who owed me more than a few favors after I saved them from a bad land acquisition down in Fresno. They drafted a cease and desist that landed like a grenade on HOA territory. The next day, things got more entertaining. A Facebook post surfaced in the neighborhood group, Pine Shadow Watchdogs, or something equally Orwellian. It featured an aerial photo of my property with a big red X across it and a caption, New neighbor refuses to follow safety guidelines, installs illegal generator near dry brush area. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. He's putting us all at risk. What if there's a fire? These loner types don't understand community values. Where's the HOA leadership? This is unacceptable. Karen, of course, chimed in halfway through the thread. We are working diligently to bring Mr. Harland into compliance. The safety and harmony of our neighborhood come first. Harmony. Right. I took screenshots of everything, comments, photos, timestamps, because smear campaigns, no matter how amateurish, were still grounds for libel when backed by fake jurisdiction and doctored maps. Later that afternoon, I caught movement on the perimeter camera facing the South Trail. A teenage boy, no older than 16, stood on the edge of my property snapping pictures with his phone. I stepped outside, arms crossed. You lost, kid? He looked startled, then mumbled something about Ms. Halloran said to check if the brush had been cleared. Ms. Halloran doesn't own this land, I said flatly. Tell her next time she wants reconnaissance, she can bring a warrant. The kid bolted. I knew what this was. A coordinated pressure campaign. Karen didn't get what she wanted, so she pivoted to the oldest tactic in the HOA manual, social shaming and manufactured outrage. Problem was, I didn't live close enough to hear their barking. But I was close enough to see them trying. That evening, I checked the HOA's official website. Karen had updated the community map page. My parcel was now shaded in the same smug beige as the rest of the subdivision. No note, no footnote. Just erased lines and falsified unity. So I went a step further. I registered a domain, www.mylandnotYoursNet. On it, I uploaded the real maps, the county boundary, the deed, the GPS survey logs. I added a short write-up titled How to Recognize When Your HOA President is Full of Shit. By midnight, it had over 400 shares. The first email I got in response was from someone 3 blocks away. Karen tried the same thing with our lot last year. We thought we were crazy. Thank you. The second one was from a guy named Mateo. If you're planning to fight her, I want in. She fined us for painting our fence beige instead of sandstone and reported my wife to code enforcement for drying laundry outside. We don't even live on her street. Suddenly, I realized something. This wasn't just me. This was a pattern. And patterns have leverage. It was a Tuesday when the guy showed up. I was working out back, running cable from the generator pad to the new junction box, when I heard gravel crunching up the drive. Not the steady roll of delivery tires or the quiet tread of a neighbor's Subaru. This was heavy, slow, like someone trying to make sure they were seen. I wiped my hands, walked around the side of the house, and there he was. Tall, mid-30s, clipboard in hand, khaki pants, cheap black shoes, and a ridiculous plastic badge clipped to a vest that said Community Safety Inspection Unit. The badge looked like it came out of a vending machine. "Morning," he said, glancing at the camera over my gate. "I'm here for a fire safety inspection on behalf of Pine Shadow Ridge HOA. I didn't answer right away. I looked at him, looked at his clipboard, looked at the unmarked white sedan idling at the bottom of the hill. Then I said, "Name?" "John." Inspector John. HOA sent me to do a Level 2 fire hazard review." I raised an eyebrow. "Level 2, huh?" "Standard protocol," he added quickly. "Generator placement, brush proximity, escape route access." I smiled. "Cool, just need your credentials, license number, fire inspection authority, jurisdictional mandate, all that." He blinked. I waited. He fidgeted with the papers. "I mean, I'm authorized by the HOA, so..." "Great, but HOA doesn't have legal authority to perform fire safety inspections. That falls under the county fire marshal's office, and you're not from them. So, again, license?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I was told this was just a courtesy inspection." I took a slow step forward. "You're trespassing and impersonating an inspector, which is a criminal offense in this county." He looked like he was about to bolt. "You're on camera, pal. Multiple angles. Might want to think real hard before you run." That's when I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff. He tried to leave. I told him if he took one more step toward his car, I'd assume flight from a potential crime scene and escalate accordingly. Maybe I was bluffing. Maybe not. Hard to say when someone's setting up to fabricate a report on your property. 15 minutes later, Deputy Ramirez arrived. Good guy, level-headed, and had dealt with HOA crap before. I showed him the footage, showed him the fake badge, the clipboard, the camera timestamps. Ramirez cuffed the guy on the spot. Turns out Inspector John was Jeremy Halloran, nephew of our dear President Karen. Lost his state home inspector license 2 years ago for falsifying safety reports to push people into unnecessary renovations with contractors he was secretly working with. Karen had sent a disbarred inspector to my property. In her defense, I don't think she expected me to catch him in the act, or to have 4 separate camera angles and a cloud backup system. I uploaded everything to a drive folder and sent it directly to Ramirez and the district attorney's office. No room for misunderstandings. That afternoon, I filed a formal complaint with the California Department of Consumer Affairs and the State Bureau of Real Estate, citing unlawful inspection, unauthorized representation of HOA authority, and potential attempted fraud. The local news picked it up within 24 hours. Apparently, fake HOA inspector arrested on private property was just juicy enough to push the story past the lifestyle section. Karen released a statement, I kid you not, blaming a miscommunication and insisting Jeremy was acting in an unofficial volunteer capacity. Right, unofficial volunteers don't carry forged badges and pre-filled violation reports. By Thursday, 2 more neighbors reached out to me. One had caught HOA reps trying to review her backyard under the guise of greenbelt inspection. Another claimed Karen had been pressuring her to replace her roof despite it passing a professional inspection just last month. Patterns. They were stacking up fast. Meanwhile, HOA Facebook was ablaze. One thread read, "This is why we need stronger community controls. Look what happens when people think they're above the rules." And another, "What kind of person calls the sheriff just because someone's trying to keep us safe?" I didn't bother replying. I just kept backing up the footage, filing every letter, every comment, every post. That Friday, a plain manila envelope arrived at my gate. Inside, a copy of the HOA's revised safety mandates policy, hand-signed by Karen, effective immediately. It declared all properties within 200 feet of HOA boundaries subject to emergency enforcement rights in the interest of public safety. My land was highlighted. The letter warned of consequences if access was refused again. I read it twice, laughed, then forwarded it to my attorney. That night, I posted a new blog entry on the site. When your HOA declares emergency powers like their Caesar. 200 shares in under an hour. The emails started rolling in. So did the stories. It was a quiet Monday morning when the envelope showed up. Certified mail this time. Official looking, big red, urgent legal notice across the front, like they thought it might scare me into compliance. The sender, a Sacramento law firm I'd never heard of, signed on behalf of Pine Shadow Ridge Homeowners Association. I poured myself a coffee before opening it because I had a strong suspicion I'd need caffeine to get through whatever nonsense they'd cooked up. It was a group lawsuit, filed in county civil court no less. Not arbitration or mediation, not even small claims. A full-blown civil complaint naming me, Zachary Harland, as a non-compliant and hazardous community occupant. According to the paperwork, I was guilty of unlawful construction on regulated land, obstruction of community easements and trails, creation of imminent fire hazards through unsanctioned equipment, deliberate degradation of communal aesthetics, which, I have to admit, almost made me spit my coffee. The kicker, they included a damages claim for lowered adjacent property values totaling $126,000. I reread that part 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. They were accusing me of personally tanking the real estate value of homes I didn't live near, in a community I wasn't part of, with trails that didn't exist, based on maps that were already exposed as fraudulent. I called my attorney. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, flipping through the scanned documents. "I wish I was." "Well," she sighed, "we're about to have some fun." That week was a whirlwind of preparation. We pulled the plat again, certified by the county engineer. I exported my full GPS survey logs from my RTK rig, the same data that's admissible in court and used by municipalities all over the state. I even had time-stamped aerial drone footage showing the total absence of any community trails near or through my property. The HOA, in contrast, had a revised map with a stamped logo from the now infamous Community Planning Committee, and a couple of blurry images printed from Google Earth with hand-drawn arrows. During discovery, we subpoenaed HOA internal communications. That's when we struck gold. In a group email from 2 months ago, Karen had written, "Even if the county doesn't recognize the extension, we can assert de facto control through neighborhood unity language. Most people won't fight it." That line hit like a sledgehammer. De facto control, unity language. Most people won't fight. Not exactly the kind of wording you want in the court record when you're trying to prove your authority is legitimate. The hearing was set for the following Thursday. They showed up with 2 lawyers in matching suits, folders full of printed screenshots from Nextdoor and Facebook, and a giant foam core board of their community map with my parcel shaded in a passive-aggressive beige. We showed up with notarized property lines, signed fire department inspection reports, aerial footage, a physical GPS survey unit, and a hard copy of the HOA's original charter, the one that clearly stated their boundaries as filed with the CID registrar in 1997 and never updated since. Halfway through my attorney's opening remarks, the judge interrupted to ask, "Wait, you're telling me their legal jurisdiction ends 3 parcels away from his land?" "Yes, Your Honor. Their own founding documents confirm it." He leaned back, rubbed his eyes, and said, "Okay, let's move this along." The HOA lawyers scrambled, tried to argue modern community definitions, but the judge wasn't having it. He read the map aloud, traced the original boundary, and muttered, "This isn't even close." 10 minutes later, the court ruled the HOA had no jurisdiction, no standing, and no right to enforce anything on my property. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, meaning they couldn't refile. Karen's team was slapped with sanctions for wasting the court's time and ordered to cover all my legal fees. I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I'd felt in months. I thought that was it, that maybe, finally, they'd back off. I was wrong, because 2 nights later, my cameras caught 3 figures on my land at 2:43 in the morning. 2 of them were carrying posts. One had a can of spray paint. The motion alert went off just after 2:40 in the morning. Normally, I'd ignore a wildlife ping at that hour. Deer, maybe a raccoon sniffing around the generator. But this one was different. 3 human heat signatures. 2 at the north edge, 1 at the driveway. I pulled the live feed on my phone. Floodlights were still off. They'd parked down the road and come in on foot. I could see silhouettes moving slowly along the fence line. One carried something long and narrow, rebar or a post. Another held a can. The third was scanning the ground with a flashlight, clearly looking for corners. They weren't lost. They were measuring. Ranger growled low beside the bed. I reached for the switch and killed the exterior motion light delay, then activated the floodlights manually. Boom! The backyard lit up like a baseball field on game night. The figures froze. One dropped a can, white spray paint, and bolted for the trees. The others turned toward the light, squinting. That's when I recognized her. Karen, wearing a dark jacket, yoga pants, and a headlamp, holding a laminated HOA jurisdiction sign. I stepped outside in boots and boxers, shotgun slung over my shoulder, not loaded, but it made the message clear. I kept my GoPro running, chest mounted, streaming to my cloud account. Karen, I called out, "You picked the wrong damn night." She actually waved, like this was some neighborly night patrol. "Zachary, we're just marking the perimeter of land you don't own," I said sharply. "At 2 in the morning, with stolen property markers. This is necessary to establish spatial context under pending policy revisions," she replied, like she was reading from a script. Behind her, one of the men, probably one of her volunteer lackeys, had begun driving a post into the dirt with a mallet. The sign read, "HOA boundary, entry restricted, trespassing subject to fine." I flipped the siren switch. The external speakers roared to life with a pre-recorded warning I'd programmed weeks ago. "You are trespassing on private property. Authorities have been notified. Leave the premises immediately." Karen flinched. Her volunteer paused. The guy with the mallet muttered, "Screw this," and took off into the woods. I dialed the sheriff's office with one hand, camera still rolling. To their credit, the deputies arrived in under 10 minutes. Probably helped that my place had become something of a recurring headline in their morning briefings. Karen was still on site when they pulled up, arguing with me in front of the floodlight like she thought volume and confidence could bend the law. The deputy wasn't impressed. He took one look at the signpost, the spray-painted boundary line already half-finished near the dry creek bed, and radioed for a second unit. They arrested Karen on the spot for trespassing, criminal mischief, and attempted property damage. Her 2 assistants were picked up later that morning when the other deputy followed their tire tracks back to a rental SUV parked near the community tennis courts. Back at her house, the search warrant turned up more than anyone expected. The garage had been converted into a sort of HOA war room. Fake signage, templates for notice violations, rolls of map overlays, and best of all, a literal rubber stamp marked Community Enforcement Authority. Also found emails between Karen and a private printer in Arizona who'd been producing fake inspection badges, HOA branded fencing, and compliance lockout kits meant to be installed on gates without owner consent. That one got the district attorney's full attention. Charges multiplied: fraud, forgery, criminal impersonation, conspiracy to defraud property owners, tampering with official documents. It was like opening a Russian nesting doll of HOA psychosis. 2 days after her arrest, a local news van parked outside my driveway. The reporter stood in front of the spray-painted sign Karen had left behind, now half-scrubbed and sun-faded, and delivered a dramatic monologue about the war over land rights in one of California's most contentious HOA disputes. I didn't bother giving a statement. I just nodded from my porch, mug in hand, watching as the camera panned across my property, my unmistakably private property. By the end of the week, Karen was out on bail, but the fallout had already begun. Anonymous posts flooded the Pine Shadow Ridge Facebook group. Whistleblowers, former board members, frustrated residents. "We never approved this." She threatened to fine me for feeding stray cats. How many other fake fines did we pay over the years? One brave soul, Mateo, the neighbor who first reached out to me, compiled a document. 10 pages of alleged HOA fund misuse. Beautification projects with no receipts, maintenance for properties that didn't exist, emergency landscaping billed twice, and then came the receipts. Some of those HOA funds were paid to a landscaping company owned by Karen's brother. Some went to a compliance consultant, Jeremy, the fake inspector nephew. Others disappeared altogether, funneled into board expenses for which no logs could be found. A forensic accountant would have a field day, so I called one. The accountant's name was Trina Gossman, and she didn't waste time. I sent her everything Mateo had compiled. Every receipt, every memo, every duplicated payment entry. Within 3 days, she called me back with the kind of tone accountants save for genuine spreadsheet-based horror. "There's fraud," she said plainly, "and then there's what your HOA has been doing." Over the next week, we dove deep. Mateo and I set up a secure drive. More neighbors joined in. Not just angry ones, but silent ones, former HOA volunteers, and even a past board member who'd quit for stress reasons. One woman, retired, had quietly photocopied years' worth of board minutes and budget reports, storing them in a cardboard box in her basement. That box was a gold mine. Turns out for over 5 years, Karen had been running a full-scale financial skimming operation. Annual dues had increased almost 40% over that time, always under the justification of fire mitigation upgrades and security enhancements. But Trina traced tens of thousands of dollars to shell companies, all linked to relatives and friends. There was Green Zone Maintenance LLC, which had billed the HOA $22,000 in emergency clearing after a mild storm, even though satellite images showed no fallen trees, and the job had supposedly taken place on HOA land that didn't exist on any registered map. Then there was Westfront Consulting, a community risk analysis firm that got $15,000 a year to evaluate fire safety compliance. That firm's official address was a P.O. box, and its business license had expired 3 years ago. The listed contact? Jeremy Halloran and my personal favorite, Sunline Security Services, who were supposedly on a night patrol retainer despite the fact that no one had seen so much as a flashlight beam in years. Trina found no payroll records, no equipment invoices, just direct deposits to a bank account in Temecula linked to Karen's cousin. We gathered everything. Every payment trail, every forged invoice, every time HOA funds went into someone's pocket under the pretense of protecting the community. Then we called the district attorney. By that point, the sheriff's office had already been investigating Karen's criminal trespassing stunt, but once the financial documents hit the table, things escalated fast. Subpoenas were issued, bank accounts were frozen. The HOA board held an emergency meeting, and for the first time in anyone's memory, residents actually showed up. Over 30 homeowners packed into a rec center built on land that had apparently been improved 6 separate times over 3 years, according to the financial reports. And in front of all of them, Karen's vice president, a man named Lowell, who always looked like a scared accountant from a sitcom, announced his resignation and handed over a thumb drive to the sheriff's liaison. "I was told not to ask questions," he said. "I should have." The mood shifted after that. What had been a weird neighborhood feud, a power-drunk HOA president versus a defiant landowner, turned into a civil mutiny. Homeowners started digging into their own records. One found a mysterious late compliance fee charged twice in 1 month for an offense they were never told about. Another discovered they'd paid a $300 green waste disposal surcharge while hauling their own yard waste to the dump in their personal truck. Mateo set up a website. He called it HOExposed.com. Within 48 hours, it had over 10,000 visitors. People weren't just angry, they were inspired. Stories poured in from across the state. Fake permits, power grabs, sudden emergency votes on obscure rules. People who'd been bullied into conformity were finding each other and speaking. It was like striking oil, hot, pressurized discontent that had just been waiting for someone to jam a pipe into it. Meanwhile, I kept doing what I did best: documenting, verifying, mapping. I compiled a public report titled The Pine Shadow Files and released it under Creative Commons so any lawyer, journalist, or pissed-off homeowner could use it. When the local news came to interview me again, I finally gave them a quote. This was never about dues. It was about control. Control people paid for without ever realizing they were the product. That night, 2 more HOA board members resigned. And then came the real hit. The California Department of Consumer Affairs, citing irregularities in fund management, structural overreach, and unlawful enforcement activity, revoked Pine Shadow Ridge HOA's operational license pending investigation. Karen's empire, the little suburban kingdom she'd ruled like a petty tyrant for nearly a decade, had officially been declared illegitimate. But she wasn't done yet, because nothing is more dangerous than someone with no power and nothing to lose. The first protest was unplanned. A dozen neighbors showed up outside the HOA office trailer. Yes, trailer because the original office had been temporarily relocated during some obscure beautification process that, according to our files, cost almost $19,000 and produced nothing but a repainted sign and a fake mailbox. People held signs, homemade, angry, funny. Where did our money go? No more shadow governments. Karen ain't a county. They weren't just shouting for me anymore. They were shouting for themselves. And for each other. Karen, predictably, did not appear. She was too busy lawyering up. Her original legal team, the Sacramento firm that had filed the bogus lawsuit against me, dropped her after news of the financial audit went public. Couldn't risk the PR blowback. Her new representation came from a solo operator out of Modesto who, if his website was to be believed, specialized in high-pressure traffic negotiation and horse lease arbitration. By then, the criminal case was in motion. The district attorney's office filed 12 counts of fraud, 3 counts of criminal impersonation, 2 counts of conspiracy to defraud, and a particularly juicy charge of misuse of public trust in a regulated civic organization. Meanwhile, I was contacted by a state senator's office. They'd seen the Pine Shadow files, and they wanted me to sit on a state advisory panel to review HOA abuse across California. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd uncovered a local tyrant hiding behind architectural guidelines and mailbox color codes. I said yes, not because I wanted to be on a panel, but because I wanted to make damn sure people like Karen would never get this kind of power again without oversight. That same week, I posted a video, How to Legally Destroy an HOA Without Burning Anything Down. It hit 500,000 views in 72 hours. I started getting invites, podcasts, YouTube debates, property law forums. I turned most of them down. I wasn't trying to be a celebrity. I just wanted to make sure people didn't feel crazy when they said, "This feels like extortion." Back in Pine Shadow Ridge, things unraveled quickly. With the license revoked, the HOA's legal powers evaporated, but their debts didn't. Turns out Karen had taken out a private line of credit against future HOA dues, essentially mortgaging the organization's future to fund her fake projects. Now that income was frozen, the loans defaulted. Vendors pulled out. The landscaper stopped showing up. Security patrols, if they'd ever existed, vanished. What remained of the board resigned en masse. A few tried to rebrand as a neighborhood council, but nobody showed up to their meetings. Trust had been nuked from orbit. Then came the kicker. During the financial discovery phase, we found a curious document buried in HOA archives, an unsigned draft agreement between Pine Shadow Ridge HOA and Beckett Development Corp., a private real estate developer known for buying up land adjacent to failing HOAs and converting them into controlled community expansions. The agreement proposed extending HOA jurisdiction another 500 feet south, right over my land and 2 other adjacent parcels. It included language for gradual absorption and promised Karen a consultant's fee of $75,000 if the deal closed within 2 years. That had never been disclosed to the residents. Suddenly, everything made sense. Karen's obsession, the false maps, the ridiculous late-night boundary planting. It wasn't just control, it was a real estate flip disguised as civic management. We published the draft. Public outrage exploded. The homeowners held an emergency vote. Not a formal one, but a symbolic gesture. Over 80% signed a petition to permanently dissolve the HOA. Legally, the process would take months, but socially, it was already over. And Karen, she was arrested again. This time not for trespassing, but for attempted unlawful transfer of land interest, a felony in California when tied to fraud. Her bail was denied. I watched the footage like everyone else. Grainy courthouse steps, Karen in a gray hoodie, handcuffed, avoiding the cameras. It was surreal. Not satisfying. Just inevitable. Mateo called that night. "She's done," he said. "I can't believe it. You actually did it." I didn't answer right away. I was standing outside, looking at the stars over the ridge, the wind rustling through the pines like nothing had happened at all. "No," I finally said. "We did. The courthouse was packed the day Karen was sentenced. I sat near the back, not out of modesty, but because I wanted to see the whole room, the faces of the neighbors who once stayed quiet, the reporters scribbling in their notepads, the disbanded board members sitting stiff as corpses. Even Mateo was there, freshly shaved, holding his wife's hand like he still couldn't believe it was over. Karen stood before the judge, hands folded like a school principal accused of stealing lunch money. Her attorney, the same guy from Modesto, tried one last plea, that she was overzealous, that she had acted in what she believed was the community's best interest. The judge didn't even blink. "In my 22 years on this bench," he said, "I have seen many cases of overreach, but rarely have I seen someone fabricate authority, weaponize it, and financially exploit their neighbors under the guise of community. That's not overzealous. That's calculated. He sentenced her to 12 months in county jail, 5 years probation, and a $94,000 restitution order. The money would be split among affected homeowners, including me, to cover legal fees, property damage, and the stress this circus had dragged into our lives. Karen didn't cry. She didn't apologize. Just stared straight ahead like someone waiting to reboot. Afterward, reporters swarmed me for a statement. I gave them 5 words. She tried to redraw reality. And then I left. Back home, it felt different. Quieter, not because the noise had stopped, but because the wariness had lifted. I didn't check the cameras obsessively, didn't triple verify every mail delivery. The gate still stayed locked, of course. I wasn't stupid. But I stopped watching my own land like it might betray me. Mateo and I hosted a cookout a few weeks later, a kind of unofficial celebration. About 40 people showed up, families, retirees, that quiet couple who always kept to themselves. Someone brought a big chalkboard and wrote in block letters, "No HOA, no fees, no bullshit." I grilled ribs. Ranger tried to eat 4 hot dogs. Kids ran through the dry creek bed like it was a frontier trail. People laughed. Real laughs. Not the stiff HOA meeting chuckles that die the moment they hit a rule book. During cleanup, someone asked me what I'd do next. I shrugged. Take a breath. Maybe fix the roof. But the truth was, I had already started working on something new. A YouTube channel, educational but sharp. Land and Liberty. A place to break down the rights most homeowners never realize they have until they're already in a fight for them. My first video, How to Read a Plat Map Without Getting Screwed. It hit 70,000 views in its first week. Emails poured in from Idaho, from Georgia, from Florida, where HOA horror stories are practically a genre. People asking for advice, sending their own maps, their own Karen encounters. Some had real legal grounds. Some just needed to hear they weren't crazy. I hired a small team, launched a nonprofit, the Free Parcel Project. Our goal? Provide legal resources, certified survey reviews, and plain English guides for homeowners dealing with overreach. We even got a modest state grant after the Senate hearing on HOA reform, which I was proud to testify at. Out here, the seasons changed. Summer crept into fall. The trees turned orange and gold. My gazebo finally got its roof. I added a backup battery to the generator, repainted the gate, and posted a new sign just below the camera. Private property. No HOA, no trespassing, no negotiation. It wasn't a threat, it was a boundary. The kind I could defend with confidence, not just because of what I'd been through, but because now thousands of others knew they could do the same. And maybe that's the best ending I could have asked for. Not that I won, but that we stopped losing quietly.